Live from the Export Beer Garden studios, you're listening to the BYC, where we do a deep dive into the world of cricket. And what a test match we've just witnessed. A game so good, so compelling that it's completely restored my faith and love of sport. Whether you're a fan of baseball or not, there can be no argument that it has completely reinvigorated Test cricket. I simply couldn't tear myself away. To such an extent, my wife has now filed for divorce. However, I can comfort myself with the knowledge there's 4 fantastic Test matches to come, and if they're even half as good as this last Test match, there's plenty to look forward to. And Dylan Cleaver, a very tired and exhausted-looking Dylan Cleaver.
Yes.
What a match, mate. What a match.
Yeah, and as far as wives go, easy come, easy go, right? But as long as you get a big screen TV
exactly
for the next month, we should be fine.
Yeah, well, I've already put that in the prenup.
You know, come round to mine.
Or I can come round to yours and have a few beersies. Well, let's hoe into it, mate, because it was an extraordinary Test match. So compelling. England, of course, 393 for 8 declared and 273. Australia 386 and 282 for 8.
Oh, my word.
Unbelievable. Let's start off with Joe Root's first innings. A masterclass.
Yeah, look, you have to ask the question, is he the best batter in the world right here, right now?
Yes, I think he is.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, you look at your Kanes, you look at your Kohlis, you look at your Smiths, but there's just something about his play, and I think he's been... You know, that baseball's rejuvenated him a little bit as well and given him a bit more vigour. And I can't help but think, you know, I think it was the beginning of day 4, the first ball of the day, where he tried to hoop him over the keeper. He just seems to be loving it, doesn't he? And maybe too, the fact, Dylan, that he doesn't have the captaincy and the burden of the captaincy has really freed him up a bit.
Dead right. And I think Ben Stokes has just told him, you are a rock star.
Yes.
Go out and bat like a rock star.
Totally.
You don't have to bat baseball, although he actually has embraced a lot of the philosophies of it.
Very much so.
But just bat like you're the best batter in the world. But I've got a couple of interesting stats for you here. He has scored 30 Test centuries, and the question is how high he can go, because he's not old.
No, how old is he?
He's about 32,
yeah,
maybe 33.
So he's got maybe another 4 or 5 years, good years in him, maybe.
Yep, exactly. He made his Test debut in December 2012, and he's played 131 Tests and batted 240 times. Kane Williamson, our legend, our GOAT, made his Test debut 2 years earlier in November 2010. He's played 94 Tests. Joe Root has scored a century every 8 innings. Kane Williamson has scored a Test century every 5.85 innings. If he had played as many Tests as Joe Root had and was scoring at that same ratio, he would now have 41 Test centuries.
Yes.
So I'm just adding that in there because I sometimes think, because of the lack of volume that New Zealand play, that we forget just what a genius we have in our ranks too. But I agree, right here, right now.
I think he's in the form of his life. And just on that, I mean, how many does Kane Williamson? Is it 27?
28.
28. Yeah. Because Kohli, he's been a bit indifferent for me. Smith, well, you can't write him off. And what does he average? 60 in Test matches. That's a phenomenal record.
Just a tick under, yeah.
And you were saying actually in the last podcast that you think he's going to be the difference. Didn't have a massive impact in this game, did he?
No, he didn't. Actually, he was. He stuck around for a bit, but he never looked totally comfortable. And England, this is all mind games, right? They say they've got something.
Yes.
For Labuschagne and for Smith. And after one Test, maybe they're right. But I still expect Smith to score big runs as this series progresses. Yeah,
I mean, just on Joe Root, even in that second innings, he went out and attacked, as is the English policy. A shitter of a shot to get out to.
Village cricket shot, wasn't it?
And he would have been kicking himself. But it was interesting, actually, when he was walking off, and Ben Stokes gave him a big sort of, the high five punch. So that, they're obviously... And the big question for me was always going to be, and I think for cricket lovers, is are they going to stick with baseball against the Australians, or are they going to crumble? And I think they've absolutely and emphatically shown that they're going to stick with baseball, that this is the way to beat them, and they will be filthy about losing this Test match.
Yeah, it's a weird one to lose, because it feels a little bit like, I'm going to draw a couple of analogies here, it feels a little bit like Italy beating Brazil in football, or England beating the All Blacks in rugby. It feels like one team did all the attacking, had all the initiative.
Yes.
Had the ball and really wanted to be on the front foot. The other team just sat back, soaked it all up, and at the end had enough to get them over the line.
And they prevailed. And that was the sort of overall thing that I felt about this test match, was that the Australians were going, we're not going to get caught up in this. We are just going to play the game that's been massively successful for us, and we're going to beat Bazball with conventional, normal test cricket.
Having said that, it was obviously rattling around in their brains. They started, Pat Cummins, one of the world's great bowlers,
yes,
arguably the number one fast bowler in the world, started this test bowling with a deep point, a deep square leg and a deep fine leg. Tell me he'd do that at Perth against New Zealand on the first day of a test. He wouldn't.
Not a chance.
Was in his head.
Oh, yeah, I think it was in his head. Well, let's talk about the declaration.
Yes.
In terms of England declaring, what was it, 380 odd for 8?
First day, yep.
The correct decision or no? Was that a step too far? I can see the reasoning behind it, i.e. let's get them in with a really awkward little period at the end of the day's play.
Yep.
But geez, they're probably thinking to themselves, we got another 20, another 30, but what ifs are generally not helpful in a game like this.
No, I could see what he was doing, but I think it was beyond bold in the way I looked at it anyway, is he did it against New Zealand on day one at Mount Maunganui.
Yes.
But he did it because knew he was putting New Zealand in under lights, and it's a perilous time to play pink ball cricket.
Yeah.
A little bit different here. I mean, his reasoning's reasonably sound, right? He thought that Khawaja in England is vulnerable, and he thought Warner's out of form.
Yes.
So let's
get a couple of early ones.
What's the last thing they want to do at the moment? 4 overs to go in the day. The last thing they want to be doing is sprinting off the field, putting all their kit on, and getting out and facing a fired-up England for 4 overs. So I get that. And I even get it 8 down. Like, he's making the point, well, we could have lost 2 wickets and 2 balls and have wasted that time.
That time, yes.
But the thing where I don't agree with it is Joe Root was not out 118 and in vintage form.
Yes.
So you were more than likely to get another 20, 30 runs out of those last 2 wickets.
Yeah, but I think it's also, when I look at that declaration, symptomatic of the way the English are approaching the game. And it seems to me, and you look at it with the field settings and all that sort of stuff, it's all about unsettling the opposition. You know what I mean? It's all about probing the weaknesses of the opposition. And that's what I was thinking there. And I think you bang on when you say Khawaja in England, and the fact that Warner, was struggling for form. So I can see the thinking behind it too. But yes, in terms of the 30 or 40 runs they might have got, they could have proved crucial.
Yeah, and look, it won't take long for sections of the English media to turn on some of these decisions. And in fact, they're already doing it. Michael Vaughan,
yes,
he came out and said those 30 or 40 runs, if you'd asked Ben Stokes this morning, would you have liked Joe to have got another 30 on that day one? You've now got them in the bank. Of course he would. I will guarantee it, Lords, if they bat first and they're 393 for 8 with 20 minutes to go, I will guarantee that they'll carry on batting. Not with Joe Root, 118 not out. Well, I don't think that's true.
Yes.
I know where Vaughan's coming from. He's got a very kind of conservative Yorkshire outlook on the sport. But you know what? I think Ben Stokes was more than happy to have them chasing 280 on the last day of the test.
And it was such a struggle to get there too, 280. I never thought that they'd get to 280, but when they did, I thought, okay, this is massively game on. And it's that scenario where, the opposition, the Australians, the closer they get, the greater the pressure, and things can happen. Ben Stokes said on that declaration, who knows, we could have got an extra 40 runs or lost 2 wickets and 2 balls. I'm not a captain who gets by on what ifs. He just answered my own question there. We saw it as an opportunity to pounce on Australia and really start day 2 on top. Waiting! Another impressive feature for me, Stuart Broad and his bowling. Vintage Stuart Broad, because you have to say, and Jimmy Anderson himself was saying, I'm not in great rhythm at the moment and I'm not at my best. And Stuart Broad, he loves
who's lived in Anderson's shadows
forever,
seemingly eternally.
Yes. He gets his gander up, he gets the crowd going, and he's capable all the time of these extraordinary little spells where he'll get 2 for or 3 for, you know, and he gets the crowd riled up. He had a superb match. I thought he bowled beautifully.
Yeah, and he is a burst kind of bowler, isn't he?
Yes.
Like, you watch him bowl for 5 overs and you think, that's no problem, I could go out there and face that. And then all of a sudden he's got a wicket and he's, you know, I've always thought of him as quite a punchable cricketer. But
oh, yes.
As he's getting
very
older,
much so. Yeah.
As he's getting older, I'm actually quite enjoying the antics, and there feels something quite comforting about them. Watching him G up the crowd, and that you think, yeah, here he goes. He's on a tear here. This is going to be good to watch. Strap in for the next half an hour.
Oh, look, guaranteed. If I was an English fan, I'd love the guy.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because he's a sort of he's kind of England's Wagner, isn't he? In the sense that he's the sort of talisman that gets everyone fired up. And but when he gets on those bursts, and once again gets Warner again
15 times,
it's quite a phenomenal stat. And that shot that Warner got out to in the first innings was an absolute shocker.
Oh yeah,
unbalanced, going for a bit of a heave.
His arms were going one way, his
body was going the other. Big inside edge, got him.
Yeah. So I've got I'm furnished with stats here. So that's the 15th time that Broad had dismissed David Warner in Tests. It's not the record, actually. In fact, it's only 10th. But the leading is Glenn McGrath had Mike Atherton on toast, also during the Ashes, obviously. 19 times he dismissed him.
Wow.
Alec Bedser had Arthur Morris. Most of these are Ashes victims because they play, England and Australia play so much more often than anyone else. Bedser had Morris out 18 times. Ambrose had Atherton. In fact, Atherton features in this list
quite a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's 3 of the top 4 there.
Ambrose and Walsh got him 17 times each. So good players got Atherton out, you'd have to say. I looked at the top 57 of those combinations. No New Zealanders feature on either side.
Yeah, nice. What do you think of Atherton as a commentator? I like him.
I like him. Yeah, I like him a lot.
He's one of those guys that just sort of says it how it is, and he's not overbearing. I think he's a good commentator. He knows the game very well. More
and more confident as he's got older too. He was a little bit, not acerbic, but a little bit dry earlier on in his commentary, which probably mirrored his playing, actually. But there's a bit of humour that's come out in the last few years too, which I've enjoyed listening to. Now,
we mentioned Warner just previous to this, and the fact that Broad has got him 15 times now. Where's he at, do you think? If you break it down year by year, 2021, 5 innings, averaged 38.37.
Which is okay. Barely okay, but okay.
Year 2022, 30.05. And year 2023, 15.62. What's your take on Warner? I feel like, I'll give you mine, it feels to me like he's a player coming to the end of his career.
Yes.
And that, I think he was pretty stoked with his contribution in that second innings.
Yeah.
And he was pumped up, you could, no, and the loud calls and the, authoritative defence and stuff. But I just feel like this is probably his swan song, potentially.
Well, he's in that very dangerous territory where he's actually come out and said when he wants to go out. So he wants to go out next summer after his home Sydney test.
Yes.
When you're already talking about the end, it makes it a lot easier for the rug to be pulled out from under you. And I do wonder if he's going to get to the end of this Ashes series. That average this year, admittedly over 5 tests,
yes,
8 innings, but 15.62, no hundreds, not scoring quickly either.
No.
A good thing about Warner was he could blaze a 40, and a 40 is stock standard for a test opener, but he'd do it in such a way that the opposition was on the back foot immediately. He's not scoring quickly now.
Well, it's interesting, because I think about you, Dylan Cleaver, and your early career as a blazing type batsman, and then I got to watch you in your current form, and it's amazing how age can really deteriorate the batting skills. You know what I'm saying? Because how old's Warner now? He's 38?
I think he's actually still 36 maybe.
Right, okay.
So he's not super old, but he was a guy that played on his wits. He played on hand speed.
Yes.
Not amazing technique, but, if they drop him, I think they'll give him one more test. I think they'll give him Lords at least.
Yes.
And if he has a double failure there, they may drop him. I think they've got Marcus Harris and they've got Matt Renshaw over there who could both open.
Though Harris has never really taken the ball by the horns, though, has he?
No, he looks like Warner light in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So. Well, this is the other thing about Warner's play as well as, he seems to have lost that belligerence a little bit, you know what I mean? Where he could get a quick 40 or 50. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the last podcast, and I think we were all sort of the same opinion, and that was the dropping of Folkes as the English wicketkeeper. Bairstow, obviously massive leg injury, comes back in, is selected as the wicketkeeper, plays a great innings in that first innings, very Bairstow-like, takes a great catch diving to his right early on, but he also had some shockers that really cost England.
Yeah, I didn't even think the catch was that great. I thought it was a good pouch, one-handed to his right.
Yes.
But it looked better because he moved really quite late, I thought. But, that was the one that stuck, so give him props for it. Some critical errors.
Yes.
That missed stumping off Cam Green's second ball.
Yeah.
You don't get much easier than that.
No.
Classic off-spinner through the gate. Just take it up to your left, whip the bails off. See you later, Cam. Spills it. Kumar Sangakkara did a breakdown of the difference between Alex Carey, who I don't rate as a top of the class keeper, but is better than Bairstow.
Yes.
And their different postures, where they took the ball, how their arms were extended. It was a beautiful piece of analysis from one of the greats of the game, and really made Bairstow look like a stopgap. And I don't know if the injury's affecting that. I think you had to play Bairstow. Don't get me wrong. And his first innings was exactly what you want from him.
Yes.
I think you had to fit him into the team, and I'm not quite sure how they could do it, but you've got to play in critical series, and keeping in England is difficult.
Yes.
You asked Tom Blundell about it, and Brendan McCullum, and they'll all tell you it's one of the trickiest places to keep because the ball moves after it goes past the stumps as well, and it can stay a bit up and down. You had to play Folkes, and I think he would have also been useful down that order when you've just got Blazer after Blazer, blazing back, coming in, to have that kind of glue guy.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing about Folkes. I think he's definitely a better keeper, but also it's not like he wasn't getting runs or contributing in that sense as well. That's why I found that selection really surprising. Getting back to Bairstow, particularly with him up to the stumps there with the spinners, he does the straight up as the wicketkeeper, and that's never a good thing when you're trying to, do stumpings and so forth. So I felt at the time, and I feel even stronger about it now, that them leaving out Folkes was a mistake.
Yeah.
And do you see that changing in the second Test match?
Well, again, I don't know how they do it. They'd have to drop either Duckett or Crawley, and they seem wedded to the idea that Crawley's going to be a match-winning player. I just don't see it myself, although he batted beautifully.
And how good the first ball.
First ball, that's an iconic Ashes moment. Right?
Yeah.
If they'd gone on to win that Test, it would have been replayed forevermore.
Yes.
Just a wonderful shot. But they'd have to, I'd say, drop either one of those two, and that means that a Bairstow, or more radically, someone like a Stokes or a Folkes would have to open. And I think it's a little bit much to keep an open in these days. Although Folkes' game does appear more suited to it, but Stokes isn't really getting a lot of runs.
No.
I know he chipped in that second innings, but he's been the one player that hasn't really blossomed under Ben Ball or Baz Ball.
Yeah, that's true, actually. But I also get the feeling with Stokes too that he's quite fragile physically. He's always wincing. He's always, there's always something going on with his knee.
He's held together by tape.
Yeah, and you get that vibe. But for me, leaving out Folkes was a big mistake. Now, one of the standout players of this Test match, of course, Usman Khawaja.
Yes.
I remember seeing him bat live at Eden Park a little while ago. It was quite a long time ago, and I thought, Jesus, this guy is a good player.
Fluid.
Just so lovely to watch. And we talk and we compare the differences of approach between the two sides. The English going hell for leather, and Khawaja just played good old-fashioned Test cricket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he did.
That first innings, great knock, and in the second innings, another great knock. And he just looks to be a player, particularly in the last few years, that just is beginning to blossom a little bit.
Yeah, well, look, his last 2 years have been phenomenal. We averaged 67.5 in 2022, and this year, after 7 tests, he's averaging 67.9. In that time, he's scored 7 test centuries. He's got 15 overall now, so he's world class. It's amazing to think that he didn't play a test between 2019 and 2022. Really good player. In some ways, not his most fluent in this test. He batted to the conditions.
Yes.
And it even looked a little bit of a grind at times in that second innings. But look, I am getting a little bit tired of the overtop celebrations.
Yes.
But he just seems like a genuinely good bloke. But every century or everything he does now seems to be some great redemption story.
Like
when he did it in Sydney, it's because he hadn't played for 3 years. And then he did it someone else, and it was because the last time he played South Africa, something bad happened. And then he did it this time, and it's because he had failed in England previously. And it's great theatre, but I was a little bit tired
it's typical Australians, isn't it?
throwing the bat away in there. I was like, I'll pick your bat up and get on with it, would you?
Well, that's the Kiwi attitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the Kane Williamson gentle raising of the bat and then moving on. And interestingly, talking about Khawaja there, he had a few altercations with Ollie Robinson. There seemed to be a little bit of tension there between the two of them.
Yeah. Look, I don't know if our wonderful producer Adam's going to have to put the beep on this, but when Ollie Robinson bowled him in the first innings, he followed it up with an incredibly easy to lip read, "Fuck off, you fucking prick," which I thought was well over the top.
Yeah.
I hate the send off. I like emotion. Don't get me wrong, and I like a good Wagner roar or. The gentle raising of the bat, as you mentioned, from Kane Williamson. But the actual send-off is really weak.
Yeah, it is.
You've done your job. He's gone.
Exactly, and it's interesting. You look at someone like Broad, who we were talking about. You know, it's clearly a celebration for the team when that scenario happens. But yeah, I'm of the same sort of feeling that the send-off is just a little bit too much.
Yeah.
You know, and particularly, you know, the guy's got 140 odd.
Yes.
Big ups to him. It's not like, hey, I got you out for 5, you loser. I mean, he batted brilliantly and got 140.
And it's not
it feels like a send-off in that scenario is like a little...
Cheap?
Cheap, yeah. It's like, well, actually, mate, look at the scoreboard, is what I'd reply to that.
Yeah, it's not like Khawaja's in the press before the game going, I'm going to sort that Ollie Robinson out.
Exactly.
He's no good, that fella.
Yeah.
And look, there's a couple of curious optics to it. One is that Ollie Robinson had a troubled history before coming into the England team. As you know, he was banned for a game or suspended for a game for tweets. Then some of the tweets were anti-Muslim rhetoric that he expressed in it, and it looked a little bit weird that the one guy he tells to F off and get out of there happens to be Australia's only Muslim. And I know that he didn't mean it in that. It was just pent-up emotion that came out at the time. But the optics of it were just, gee whiz, Ollie, I might have held that one back if I was you. And the other crazy thing he did was in this very unapologetic press conference, and I guess I don't mind that so much if you're going to do the big send-off.
Then own it.
Yes. So I had no problem with him coming in and saying, it's all theatre. You know, it was just emotion. But I did think it would come back to bite him when he said, Australia have got 3 number 11s and we're going to exploit that.
Yeah.
And look what happened in the final day, which will...
Waiting!
Well, you know, I have to say that when there was 50 or 60 odd with 3 wickets in hand, and when Carey went, she's all over.
Yeah.
But then into the Australian skipper, who for a large part at the start there didn't look in particularly great nick. He played some shots in the first innings, but got them home. And now they're calling it Cumball.
Oh, no, we're not going there, are we?
Yeah, well, I'm not. But I'm not. That's not something that I'm going to pick up on.
No, I don't mind Trav Ball.
Yeah,
it's got a bit of assonance or consonance with Bazball. I don't forget what the proper term is.
Cumball?
No. I tell you what, though, that's an important test for Pat Cummins because he is a great cricketer, But he's had this weird thing in Australia for the past 12 months where he was everyone's favourite Australian.
Yes.
And then suddenly...
And God, he's good looking.
Suddenly the tide turned on him a little bit.
Yeah.
He came out and said he wasn't comfortable with promoting and coal-burning energy stuff, and he gets the woke, Australia's built on minerals and mining. How dare you take a stand on something you don't know anything about? And then there was Justin Langer getting ditched, and Cummins being quite unapologetic about the fact that a lot of players found Langer difficult to deal with, and his emotions were too up and down, and they wanted someone calmer in the dressing room. And then of course, he got hammered by former players, Matthew Hayden's and the like, who said, what a disgrace, Langer's given his heart and soul to the baggy green.
Yeah, all that jazz.
All over it and all that. So the kind of tide had turned a little bit. So he was magnificent in this test. On an unresponsive wicket, he was excellent. 4 wickets, I think, in the second dig.
Yeah.
And just he bowled this one big booming in-swinging Yorker to
Ollie Pope. What a ball that was.
What a ball.
A top nut. I'm quite intrigued, actually, and I don't know if it's just me making it up in my head, but I perceive a little bit of tension between Cummins and Steve Smith. I think Steve Smith is so desperate to be the captain still.
Still yapping.
And he's still yapping and he's still giving directions. And Cummins a couple of times was like, no.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if there's just a little bit of a power play going on there with Steve Smith going, I'd do this or I'd do that. And Cummins going, well, no.
Yeah, it could be creative tension that works for them.
Yes.
In the end. But I do take your point, and there's often the camera will pan to Steve Smith in the slips, and he'll be doing little hand gestures like saying to someone, let's just for argument's sake say it's Travis Head on the boundary, mate, 5 yards to your left, and that, well, Pat Cummins has got his back turned and walking back to the mark, and that can't be easy, and it could work for them.
Well, and looking at this test match, if there is any tension in that regard, then Pat Cummins sort of answered it emphatically, didn't he? Because he brought the Australians home. They should never have won in the end.
No, they shouldn't.
And it was, I could not believe that, it was England's to lose in the end of the match. And
they did some weird things too at the end, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Not taking the new ball.
Yes, yeah. I think at that stage, the theory was that Joe Root was, causing a bit of bother, and he was bowling well.
Yep.
And another important feature to mention in this test match, actually, just on that Moeen Ali's finger.
Yes.
I mean, I never thought he was going to be a match winner anyway, but that was a bit of a fly in the ointment for England as well.
Do you know what? After watching him in the first innings, early in the first innings, I thought he was going to be a match winner because he was giving it a rip and it was turning a mile. But then you have the soft skin from having only played...
Yeah, because of T20. That's why. 4 overs.
White Kookaburra with not very pronounced seams. Suddenly he's been asked to rip a hard Duke's ball with a very proud seam for 30-something overs, and it just tore his finger to pieces. And you got to ask, what sort of role is he going to play for the rest of the series if he can't
do that?
Bowl the sort of overs that you want your spinner to bowl.
I think Root's quite an underrated off-spinner, actually. I think he's pretty handy, more than handy.
That could be a way you shoehorn folks into the 11. If you do say Root is your spinning number one spinner.
Yes.
Ali drops out because he can't bowl. Folks comes in, bats in. But it puts a lot of pressure on the seamers then. Stokes is going to have to bowl a lot more overs than he currently looks capable of under that scenario.
Yeah, fair point. Well, let's look at the upcoming second test. More of the same, one would hope.
Wait, it's a big gap.
Oh, yeah, how long is it?
I don't think it starts till the 28th, so that's this time next week.
Yeah.
Feels too long. I just want them to go rolling straight on to the next one.
Just get into it. Start next week.
England have to win it.
Yes, they do.
Or they can't lose it.
Yeah, I think they're infinitely capable of doing that, and they've proven that, and they should have won this test match. Any changes both sides, given what we've just been discussing?
Well, in terms of fitness, we've got to see with Moeen Ali.
Yes.
And if he's not fit...
Folks.
Well, it'll be intriguing. That's what I'd do. But
yeah.
Maybe they call up the young leggy who hasn't played a lot of cricket lately. Australia, Boland was ineffective. So
well, we talked about that, didn't we? And I wondered if his consistency would actually play against him with Bazball, because he's much more predictable than the other bowlers.
And that's who Root kept on reverse ramping. Yes. He knew exactly where it was going to be.
Yes. But he plays that shot so well, though, doesn't he?
He does.
I think he made the comment, it just feels like I can't miss.
Yeah.
You know?
Even when he missed.
Even when he missed that first ball, the start of the day.
I think they have made it very clear they will rotate their seamers. Hazelwood wasn't particularly effective either, so either Boland or Hazelwood will drop out for Stark, I imagine, or Nisa, who I think will be more than useful in English conditions if he gets around.
Yeah, Hazelwood, he didn't bowl a lot in the second innings. What was that about?
No, well, he's been on lighter loads because he's come back from a reasonably serious side injury. But
yes.
You'd think if he was on lighter loads, they would have saved him for the next test. But
absolutely.
Nisa also gets rid of that problem of a very long tail as well.
Yes.
Because let's face it, Cummins is not going to win you
every test match.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. As you say, Dylan Cleaver, a bit annoying that it's going to be so long before we get to the next match, but worth waiting for. Thanks to all the people for listening to this podcast. Download us. Rate us. Give us 5 stars.
Can I have a little plug?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I've been working on a book with Carl Heyman.
Oh, yes.
The fine all-black tight-head prop, arguably the finest tight-head prop in the world in his day. It's I would say this, but it's a cracking read. He's certainly poured every bit of himself onto the page.
Yes.
Out in bookstores now. It's called Head On. Rugby, Dementia and the Hidden Cost of Success. It's Carl Heyman's memoir. All good bookshops. Go on and grab a copy. I think it'll be well worth your time.
Good on you, mate. What's going on with the bounce at the moment?
The bounce is still tracking along. Obviously, subscribe to that as well, dylancleaver.substack.com, or just go to your Google machine and type in Dylan Cleaver and the bounce.
Yes.
And sign up. It's free.
Good stuff, mate. Well, thanks for taking the time. I'm not sure if we're back next week or not. No, I don't believe it. We'll have a break before the next test and then be back after the next test match. But thanks for taking the time to listen. Beautiful.